All right, hey everybody, welcome to the RenoFam podcast. My name is Joey, and this podcast is designed to help equip parents to be the spiritual leaders of their home. This podcast does come with a disclaimer. I'm no expert at parenting, but I do want to get better. So what does that mean? We have conversations with people. We continue to learn. And I bet you out there, parents, you feel the same way. So let's do this. Let's learn together. The RenoFam podcast is a ministry of Renovation Church in Hampstead, North Carolina. And today, I have the one, the only, Jordan McClarnon on the podcast.
Happy to be here.
Jordan is the student director here at Renovation Church and the best youth director in the country. Often called the CEO of our squad. Self-proclaimed, I believe. As a college athlete, Jordan can dribble soccer balls, basketball, surf and skate, and do all the things the youth guys do the best. Jordan is married to the amazing coach, Lauren McClarnon.
Yes.
And they got baby Mac on the way. Baby Mac on the way. Yes, sir. That's exciting. That's exciting. Every time your wife is in the office, I'm like, that's Jordan's baby in there.
I know.
They're about to have a baby. That's cool.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I know you guys are pumped. What is it?
Excited.
Due date?
First
everybody?
week of July.
First week of July.
I know. It's
So
coming
by
up
the
fast.
time I finally get this podcast edited, the baby will be born. I'm just kidding. We'll get it out quicker than that, folks. But yeah, man. So thanks for jumping on the podcast.
Of course.
And
Excited to be here.
just carrying on this conversation with parents and how to continue to, specifically for this one, talk to, conversate, reach teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your heart. And you've been here 3 years now?
I know.
Yeah, just crossed the 3-year line with us on staff. You came, you brought COVID to us.
Here 1 year.
No,
before
yeah,
COVID.
1 year before COVID.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you got your feet wet a little bit,
That's
and
right.
then jump right and you've done an amazing job, an incredible job at. It has been student ministry is already shifting and pivoting constantly.
For
The
sure.
culture's always changing. Things you're always and then you throw a pandemic in the middle of it, and it's a whole nother game.
Yeah.
And the way you stepped up to lead, meeting kids in different spaces and places because you couldn't go to the basketball game anymore.
Right.
And one of the things that was birthed out of this was the online gaming world.
Yes.
For our student ministry.
Crazy.
And it's exploded. So tell us a little bit about that, the beginning, the genesis of it, and then where we are now.
For sure. Well, I've been a gamer for a long time, but I totally had no idea how to get into that space of live streaming and being able to build a community and an audience and interact with people. I knew that people did that, but I think you were actually the one who was like really pushing at the beginning of COVID, like we got to get in this space. And I was more concerned with, I don't know how to do it,
Right.
So I literally just hit up a few of our students.
That's all you need.
Yeah, who were in gaming. And I was
Couple
like,
teenagers.
I
Yep.
need you guys to help me figure this out. They told me what I needed to buy.
Yeah.
They came over to the house. We set it up, and I did a stream. And I think the first one we ever did, we had like 20 teenagers in their bedrooms, on their phones, whatever, across the space, who were interacting with us, watching us. And I think what's so cool about that is we're not just building community, but gaming is massive.
Right.
And a lot of people that you don't even think game. They game. We got people all across the spectrum that play Minecraft and these other games that are just absolutely huge. So it's given us opportunity to put students in front of other students to play games, but also to build community and interact with people. The gaming space, unfortunately, is not the most healthy space, I would probably say.
It's icky.
There's a lot of creators, people out there
Right.
who have so much influence, but a lot of it is kind of just garbage.
Yeah.
I see the value in getting into that space. So what we're hoping to try to do is create healthy community, healthy interactions with people over something that a lot of students are into and doing. So we've had a lot of fun with it. At this point, I kind of oversee it all, but students run the show. They play the games. They set up the streams. We've had students who've come to our squad and have been a part of like our ministry because they found out about us through Twitch and through gaming, whether that was a tournament or whether that was a weekly stream that we did. So the fact that that actually is having reach in this community and that people are seeing their friends and people they know from their school playing video games and influencing them in a positive way is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was, COVID was coming around, and I was thinking when I was doing student ministry, you always tried to figure out where students were hanging out, and you went there, right? So with COVID, literally like every park is closed because that made sense. Schools were closed, like everybody's at home. And the question was, where are they getting together? And I was like, they're online playing video games.
Totally,
So like, just like you as a youth pastor would go to the basketball court, like we got to figure out how to get there.
Yeah.
And then Twitch, like I didn't really know anything about Twitch.
It's huge.
But for people that don't understand how big this world is, talk about some of the top Twitch gamers right now.
Yeah.
And the numbers of followers they have in a single game.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I play a few games. One of them, it's an old throwback, is Halo. I watched a Halo like tournament the other day.
Yeah.
There were 80,000 viewers.
80,000.
80,000 people were watching this. Now, what comes to my mind instantly is like going to the Passion Conference with 65,000 people. I know what that looks like and feels like. It's a packed out, huge arena like the Georgia Dome or something. 15,000 more people were watching people play video games. When you think about it that way, it's really insane. It's astronomical, the reach and influence that some of these people have. They have millions of followers and stream and cast and live stream something weekly, maybe 5-6 times a week to 50, 60,000 people. I mean, it's incredible when you think about the reach there.
Yeah, that's hard to that's hard from, because
it's the new TV.
Well, yeah, but even more. Like, there's nobody pulling
Right.
50 million viewers a week on television.
No, definitely. And I think what's crazy, at beginning, when you're first hearing about it, you're like, why in the world would people want to watch people play video games? The more you sit and think on it, look, a lot of students who are interested in basketball are probably never going to sit down and be able to interact with LeBron James.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
They're probably not going to get to meet him. But you can actually go online to Twitch, find the game that you're the most interested in, watch the best person in the world play it, and you can chat with them, and there's a chance that they will respond live in the moment to your question or your comment.
Yeah.
There's another level to that, which is pretty wild. And so you think about, oh yeah, in the same way I watch this football game or basketball game, I'm watching the best of the best. I'm watching the best of the best do something that they love to do, and they're providing entertainment, they're providing humor, they're providing tips on how to get better at the game. The influence there is really huge. So
when we were in the office that day and you were showing me the Twitch stuff, I don't remember which gamer we were watching, but literally he started a feed, and within a few minutes he had, like 40,000 more people watching than will fit in the Mercedes-Benz arena.
Yeah.
In minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, so we've always talked about it was a football stadium worth of people there, and it's like, no, this is like one dude's Twitch stream worth of people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the measurements of audience size is unbelievable.
And in
minutes,
right?
In minutes, there was an audience of that many folks.
Totally. Yeah. So we've done some cool things with it. I mean, just in terms of we've done a few tournaments that we've had 75 students play in.
Yeah.
That's huge,
Mm-hmm.
and this is really just only the beginning of it for us. We've really only been doing it for a year and a half or so. So the fact that you have almost 100 teenagers from this community alone who participated and played a game together and competed in a tournament, it's huge.
Well, and you look at that. So let's say you had a youth group of 100 kids. If you were to call around and go, hey, we're going to meet and play basketball, you'd have 20 of them show up. Right?
Yeah.
We've got a youth group of around 100 to 120 kids. We got 70 to 80 of them that are on these channels gaming online. It's so much broader than a single sport brings to the table or anything else like that.
Definitely unites a lot of different people who have a lot of different backgrounds, experiences. A lot of people love gaming. A lot of people love being able to connect and communicate with other people through it. So it's definitely uniting people and students, but also you can shoot the link to somebody who goes to Topsail High School but isn't a part of the R Squad community, and they pull it up. Oh, I'm seeing 2 people that I have second period with, and they're playing a game I love. Oh, cool. I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm
and
gonna
nobody's
hang
cussing.
out in the chat for a little bit. Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
and it's clean. It's a good place for them to hang out, And the other cool thing that we've seen happen is because of our location, for listeners, we're in the Hampstead, North Carolina area, but just north of us is Jacksonville, and the largest Marine Corps base in the country. So we have students that come to our church. Their parents get moved, they move, but then they're jumping back on Twitch. Definitely. And it's like, hey, we've got kid Braylon, right? He's jumping on with his team, playing still Fortnite with our crew, community. And we're still able to keep in contact with him because of this medium. So
definitely.
Very cool.
It is. It's cool.
Awesome. So let's. I didn't even plan on getting into gaming, but it just happened. So this is the podcast. I can do what I want. So Jordan, tell us a little bit about you. Kind of where you come from. You're a PK.
I am.
For those listening, that's a pastor's
Shout out
kid.
to the PKs.
So we got some PKs in the house. Pastor John's a PK.
Yeah.
Got a lot of those. Just talk about how did you get started in ministry, you know, because most of the time you don't see a lot of PKs go, I want to do exactly what Dad does, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
talk us through that, what that journey was like.
Yeah, definitely. So when I was 5, my family moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, and my dad, with a handful of people, a small team, planted his first church in the Raleigh area, Apex. And we were there for probably 10 years or so, and so it started out in the movie theater.
Yep.
Went to the school. We did Christmas Eve in the park. You know, I mean, like, we've done church everywhere. And so I just grew up being around that. It wasn't weird to me. It was just, hey, this is just what it is, you know?
Yeah.
We did end up moving into a building, and so I got to be a part of that process and seeing that when I was in middle school. And then really as I was about 7th or 8th grade, that church was moving well. It was going smoothly, and Dad was like, hey, we're going to move to the other side of Raleigh, and we're going to do it again.
Oh, wow.
And so we moved to the other side, to the Garner area with a handful of people, and we started another church in another movie theater. And so I was a part of 2 church plants in elementary through high school, which was a really cool thing. I was just around it a lot. That was the heart of my family and you know, the community that we were involved in. And so it's just always been a part of my life. Was there all the time. Setup team, breakdown team, first people there, last people to leave. I didn't actually begin a relationship with Jesus really until I was in high school. So I was around it. Right. I had the head knowledge. I did not really have personal connection or relationship with Jesus. And I don't really think it was because I had bad experiences. I think I mostly had really good experience of working in a family who was a part of ministry. And I think my parents did a really great job of, I wouldn't just say protecting me from it, but in giving me a really great vision for what this is supposed to look like.
Yeah, a picture of it.
Healthy way to be in ministry as a family, which was great. I was just a high school kid who was doing foolish stuff and getting into problems and doing my own thing. And eventually, later in high school, had a really powerful encounter with the Lord, and that kind of moved me back onto the right track. But what was so important at that time was the role that my youth pastor played in that big stage of life in my development. He was with me, you know, when I was ghosting him. No, I don't want to go hang out and grab lunch or hang out with you, you know. But then as I was working through a lot of things that God was doing in my life, I knew he was there. And so although we didn't really have much of a connection throughout some of the later middle school, early high school years, he was there, and he was the first person I got in contact with when I did have that encounter with the Lord and wanted to get back on a path of taking this thing seriously. I just didn't know what to do or how to begin. So we began meeting on a pretty regular basis, and he just began pouring wisdom into my life, encouragement into my life. He had been speaking things over me about my potential and who I was and all of that for years. You know, and most of the time I was just like, yeah, okay, whatever, dude, you know. Just had no interest in it. But I knew he was there, and so I really started connecting with him on a weekly basis throughout my senior year of high school, and that ended up setting a really good trajectory for me as I moved into college, thinking then about what I want to do with the rest of my life, and these words that he had been speaking over me for years of my development, you know, as a teenager, were starting to just resurface, and they had been rooted within me, and ultimately it came down for me of being able to do what he did for me for other people, being able to help teenagers walk through a difficult season of life, a challenging season of life, and be able to have someone who's in their corner, who's cheering them on, who's fighting for them, and who provides encouragement when it's needed, wisdom when it's needed. He did that for me, and so I want to be able to help other people in the same way he helped me. Yeah,
that's such an encouragement for other youth pastors who might be listening. You know, you're super popular in the youth pastor world. I know this. But even our own small group leaders, like the fact is, like, there are kids that got you bookmarked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and they're going to pick it up, and they'll like, you know, they know you're there. They're ghosting you. They're not answering your texts. They're not showing up at the events.
That's youth
but
ministry.
One day something happens, and it's like, oh, I got to get up with Jordan.
That's it.
You know, oh, I got to get up with my small group. Like, it all of a sudden it's back and it's there. And you so often see that's what God uses that as a catalyst to really do some amazing things. So that's really cool. So being PK, you're in a lot of youth stuff. Tell me your craziest youth ministry story.
Man, I've got a lot. When I was looking at this question, it was just...
We all have a lot. And we ask questions like,
bringing back memories.
What's the statute of limitations? Will this be used for a deposition?
To protect the people
Goodness
involved
gracious.
In these stories. Yeah, definitely. Lauren and I last night, we were walking through just some, oh, man, did you remember that? And she's like, I had totally remembered that from my mind.
And for those of you listening going, I can't believe youth pastors are so irresponsible. Parents, most of you you can't hardly handle your one teenager at home. Imagine taking 100 of them to a beach camp for a week. You know what I mean?
Sure,
The risk potential here is extraordinarily high. Things are going to go down.
Definitely.
Things are going to happen.
We always want teenagers inviting their friends, inviting people who don't know Jesus. So then you add
we don't know
mix.
who,
I don't know who these kids
we don't know who they are.
We're happy they're here, but teenagers are going to do teenage stuff. So
there's no like juvenile background check, you know? I mean, there kind of is, but they don't really ever produce anything.
I got a few stories. Was trying to think through what I can share.
Give me your
I'm just going to share
your best one.
This is pretty crazy. So we're just going to call this kid Sam. That is not his name.
All right,
Sam. He was a high schooler. This was years ago, but I've been working at a church for a while, working in youth ministry. We had a few instances through events we were doing where Sam was sort of acting like he wasn't feeling too good. I'm kind of dizzy, my head's spinning a little bit. I don't feel so good. And he would kind of sit off to the side or whatever. Well, then each time it kind of escalated a little bit more and more. And he's that kid where his family didn't come to church, but he would walk every single week.
Yeah.
Sam, he's going to be there.
Walking Sam.
He's probably going to be 45 minutes early, but he's going to be there. So it was this pattern, and some leaders were picking up on it, like, is he like, okay, something seems wrong? I don't really know what the deal is. So got to a point where we had a few times where he was like, kind of starting to make a little bit of a scene of it. Okay, it's not just feeling good, but everyone needs to know I'm not feeling good. And kind of, we're in the middle of a game, and he would kind of act like he was getting ready to pass out or something like that. So it starts to just escalate more and more. And students are kind of, what's going on? It's a little strange. So 2 weeks in a row, in the middle of worship, I had students down at the front. Sam was just like, hands raised, up in worship. He's participating, and he just falls. Straight down. I mean, he didn't brace himself or anything. It was like he had straight up passed out and had just smacked the ground. Week 1 was in the middle of worship. Week 2 was in the middle of my teaching. I'm just up there preaching. And
he just goes.
He stands up, and he kind of just, starts walking around a little bit, like he's super disoriented, and just wham, falls down on the ground. So the first time he kind of snaps back a little bit. We pick him up. We're able to figure out what's going on, get him some water, whatever, and he kind of shakes it off. The second time, he didn't get up. Just laying cold. I mean, it was like he had just got knocked out, laying on the ground. I'm like, what is going on? We got called. We got called ambulance. We got 911 here.
And you're how old are you in this?
23.
23. Okay. Yeah. So you're one of the leaders in the room, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, and I'm preaching. This kid stands up. He falls down on the ground. He's not moving. He's not responding. Like, okay, hey, we need to get somebody on the phone. We got to get something here. So the ambulance comes. You got people, EMS who are coming into the situation here. They come up. They grab him, and they put him in the ambulance. They're trying to work some tests on him and stuff like that. So I talk with some of the, and they ended up taking him, to the hospital. So I talk with some people who were there on the scene. They said, hey, we want you to know, like, this was all a joke. This was a lie. Like,
what?
He's fine.
This kid's taken a full fall to the face.
Multiple. He was, just fully like sending it, falls to the face, smacking on the ground. They're like, hey, when we were down there, like checking his heart rate, his blood pressure, some other things, we saw him like open his eyes.
Yeah.
We saw him like twitching and moving around a little bit, which would totally not be happening. Come to find out, for the past like 2 years, we've been getting like bamboozled by this kid who's been faking injuries and accidents. And we had this just scene after scene in youth ministry to the point where now he's falling down and wiping out in the middle of youth services. The whole place is like freaking out.
Everything gets stopped.
Everything stops. Night's over, canceled. And it was all just probably to grab a little bit of attention, which I know that's not great. Obviously, there's some other problems that were going on there, but just crazy.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah. Exactly. I remember this moment of like, I had no idea what to do multiple weeks in a row. After talking with some of these workers, they're all just like, yeah, you're getting played, man.
Yeah.
This is all fake. So then it's like, how do you then tell your team and the youth and stuff? It's just like, we can't have someone pass out every week.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so, okay, here's the deal. If a kid passes out, and it's not Sam, respond. If it is, throw a blanket on him.
I know.
And give him a pillow.
It's a strange thing. And I mean, yeah, that was just something that was coming to my mind of just how weird that whole situation was. It was like, I got a kid who's just every week he's passing out, but I don't think he actually is. I think he's just faking it. So how do we handle this? Very bizarre.
You going to do it today, Sam? Sam, we got a really good worship set. You gonna pass out? If you do, when we sing the words, "Let the fire fall," you should. Man, I tell you, you'll get some. Yeah, you get some. We had one kid. His favorite thing to do would be to get up and wave, like walk right in front of the speaker and just do one of these, like a little wave, hello, and then like walk out to go to the bathroom or something. But like he wouldn't just go to the bathroom quietly, like walk in front, look at him eye to eye, whoever's teaching, give him a little wave and keep walking. I'm like, why? Yeah. Why are you doing that, man?
This is some of those those moments where you're just like, I don't know how to respond to this. There wasn't a class on this.
Stay with us. Yeah, they don't. You never get you don't get a class on the Sams. You don't. This is like you just got to figure it out.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about teenage culture. I mean, you're constantly studying it. You're always reading what's happening, what's going on out there. And then even in our local community, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in teenage culture since you started? I know you were in different areas. You were even West Coast for a little while, doing student ministry over there. Now you're here. And so you've got not only just some history of working with teenagers, but some geographic diversity. If you're West Coast to East Coast kids, Yeah. Well, what are you seeing change?
Yeah, well, it's been cool to work in different youth ministries on the West Coast, on the East Coast. I've worked in the Midwest. I mean, all different places. Some like very affluent cities and areas, and others not so much. So what I think is kind of cool is that there's some things that just is a part of every teenager, every teenage culture. Yeah. Teenagers are, they love music, they love this, they love fashion, like whatever. And that's the same generally throughout. There's definitely are some things, depending on where you're at geographically or around the U.S., that do change a little bit, or that you have higher levels of or lower levels of. Something I think that's been interesting is looking at what year one was like at Renovation 2019. Yeah. And then looking at now the past 2 years, because a lot has changed. And I think in a lot of ways, we're still going to be continuing to see the ripple effects of what's happened over the past 2 years for 5 to 10 years to come, of really the ramifications of it and how it's affected students. A few things that I am just thinking about right now is, of course, one of them is the digital world.
Right, yeah.
I think back to me being in high school, I had Facebook.
Sure.
Like when I was a sophomore, junior. Remember I got my first phone, flip phone. I didn't even have texting. Dude, that was so lame. I remember having an argument with my mom, and she was like, texting's not even going to be a thing. She was like, sorry, Mom. She was like,
it's the fax machine of the phone.
Yeah, she's like, it's not important. No one's going to be texting. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Why would you text when you could just call somebody?
Totally. And at that point, Facebook was just not even a way that I can connect with my friends. It wasn't super efficient. It wasn't like you got to sit in front of your desktop.
Faces. And
you got to sit in front of your desktop.
What are you doing?
Totally. Yeah. The way that it has escalated and changed in 5 years, I mean, is just astronomical. There's so many different ramifications to that when you start looking at teenagers getting their driver's licenses later and later and later in life.
Sure,
A lot of research from Barna Global Youth Culture is saying, hey, that's because FaceTime and Snapchat and other means of communication and digital media are sort of creating the illusion that you can be with your friends whenever. So there's no reason to.
So that's why they're waiting to get their driver's license.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was 16th birthday. I'm grabbing, my driver's license. I'm going to my friend's house for the bonfire to hang out.
Yeah, like I was seriously getting worried for teenagers. I'm like, you guys don't want to drive?
Yeah, no.
What's up with that?
That really is a huge part of it. Is that
makes sense.
I feel like I can be with my friends whenever, whether that's through gaming or that's through Snapchat or through FaceTime, which obviously we know it's not the same. But if you've grown up in it and that's all you've ever known and been accustomed to, it doesn't seem quite that strange. But when you look a little bit more into habits and rhythms, what I'm kind of seeing right now in student culture is, I think for the past few years, it has been, an all-out like digital assault of, hey, you got to get this app, news, like all the things. I think right now we have a lot of teenagers that are noticing the negative effects and impacts that that's having on their relationships, their mental health, their spiritual health and relationship with the Lord. The problem here is that a lot of them are realizing that it has negative impact. The follow-up to that is, but I just don't know how to stop
it. Yeah.
I just don't know how to put it in its proper place. I'm seeing the negative effects, but whether it's the fear of missing out, whether it's the fear of not, staying in the know, whether it's just, I'm just kind of addicted to this thing and it's ruining and wreaking havoc in other habits and rhythms in my life, whatever the case may be. A lot of them are seeing the negative impacts and effects, just not quite having the knowledge, the wisdom, or the accountability in place to be able to navigate and actually then put into practice new habits, new rhythms, new ways of living. And I think ultimately that's leading to a lot of students who have 5,000 followers on Instagram, but no close friends.
Yeah.
And that's another problem when you get into loneliness and worry, especially over the past 2 years. We've sort of gone to some escapist behaviors that create the immediate sense of satisfaction or community connection. But when you really get down to it, I think Barna just released a study a few weeks ago, 45% of 13 to 18-year-olds say they don't have one close friend.
Wow.
That's huge.
And that's for a parent listening, most of you didn't say that.
Right.
You had more than one hand.
Oh,
most of you probably had more than two hands.
Definitely.
Right? You had 10 plus of friends that, you could get up with.
Yeah.
45%, 13, 18, so they don't have one close friend. Wow.
Right. Yeah.
Man.
So I think it's creating a lot of questions for us to really think about as families, but also as students and people who lead the next generation is, in what ways are we also being sucked into some of these lies and traps as well? The trap of the illusion of social media, the illusion of having a lot of followers but no close friends, because those are things that adults deal with and struggle with as well.
Sure.
Sometimes more life experience or more maturity can help us navigate some of those things, but sometimes, we're just as guilty, we're just as susceptible to a lot of those lies or problems as a 13-year-old.
One of the things we did, and you can speak more into this in recent, but when we were first starting the church and I took our first group to camp before you came on our staff, one of the things I did was I took all the cell phones.
Yeah. Yeah, we just did that this past week.
Yeah, and I was like, man, how's this going to go? Like, there's always that little bit of, nervousness you have because, we understand, and Stuart Hall has talked about this before, that this generation has two heartbeats. One's their natural organic heartbeat that's literally in their chest. The other one is a digital heartbeat.
Yeah.
And with that comes this feeling of responsibility that they have to be in those spaces and in those places,
right,
just as they have the responsibility to show up at work, to be home in time for dinner, whatever, in real life, right? So we're like, hey, we're going to take your phones from you for the entire week. And it was because I had a toolbox and I just opened it up and the kids would come by and they're like, you got to pull it out of their clutches, and we went through the whole week. The first day, you could see the awkwardness, it's I have to look at people. What do I do with my hands? And then end of the week, what I'll never forget this. I open up the toolbox. I'm like, okay, you guys can come get your phones. And nearly, and I'm telling you, 98% of them didn't want their phone back. They're like, dude, literally, if I heard, do I have to take it back? Once I heard it 100 times. It was wild. And it showed me that so many of these kids are held prisoner to something that they think is actually great for them. And it's not, like you said, the maturity's not there. The other social skill they would need to be responsible with that tool is not there. And it's a weight, it's a burden. So they're like, they knew that as soon as they got it back, it was it's like they were coming off of vacation, right? Back to the grind of my phone, Yeah. And you guys still do that, which is
love it,
incredible.
Yeah. We had some people who were there just from the Crowder's camp staff or some other people who came in and helped make the weekend happen that were blown away that we took phones away from 125 teenagers. They just couldn't understand how that would even be possible. And we had the same exact experience. Hear a little bit of hesitation for, on the ride up, knowing that I got to let go of this thing. But Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we really didn't hear much about it at all. A lot of students, oh man, there's a lot of freedom now that I don't have to worry about this thing, So I think that a lot of students and adults alike, I definitely don't want this to come across as hey, this is a student problem. It's not. It's a culture problem.
Right, yeah.
That has just big ramifications in developmental years, is just the way that devices and screens are forming us. We don't pick up the iPad and be like, I'm gonna get formed today by people's opinions or these videos or this or that. It's unintentional formation, but it totally changes the way you view people, the way you view relationships, and really the way you view faith and God as well, which is huge.
Yeah, that's interesting because, like, I'm 35. We would look at this and we go, oh, yeah, this is just a tool, right? But you're saying that this has moved, it's well beyond tool with the next generation. It is a formation object for them at this point.
Totally.
Which is a completely different way to think.
Right.
Because for even me, I grew up my teenage years without the smartphone. Even my college years, I think I got the first iPhone when it came out, but I mean, I don't have to have this.
Yeah.
The next generation can't imagine life without this.
Definitely.
At least not a life where they were in control of their social norms. A teenager, right? Elementary school, whatever. But a teenager looks at these things and, like, you're right. This is a formation piece of it.
Definitely, yeah. Whether or not we see it as that really or not, I think the more we think about it, the more we realize I'm intentionally being formed by it. Sometimes when I search Google for something, I know what I'm doing, but there's a lot of ways I'm unintentionally formed by it through filters. I mean, there's so many things that are just slowly kind of changing, you know, the way you view and see the world in a lot of ways. And it's not all happening at once. It's not all something we're necessarily aware of, but over time, it's unintentionally forming us. It's forming our habits. It's forming our minds. It's forming a lot of things.
I saw an article, and this was before, this is 10 plus years ago. And it said, and the article was, I think it was titled, like, Google's the new dad. And I was like, what is that? So it just intrigued me, so I started reading it. And I didn't even have kids at the time when I was reading this article. But it was saying that they were looking at search results, and they could tell that young men were looking up how to tie a tie. And the article was, okay, this was something that you used to stand next to your dad in the bathroom mirror. He had his tie, you had yours, and you followed, right? But now that's not happening. And so even for dads, fathers, and mothers as well, like the things that maybe we learned by standing eyeball to eyeball or shoulder to shoulder with a parent, that's being done through Google. That's being done through YouTube now. Like these other things are taking away those key moments. I mean, I have a memory of standing in the mirror with my dad learning how to tie a tie, right? Like that. But we have a generation of kids that those moments, scale of meaningfulness lets you decide, but like those aren't happening in relational context. They're now happening in a digital space. Right. And so detached from that. Yeah. Right. So that has formation all over it as well.
Totally. Yeah. The last piece I would think about to include in this kind of portion of the conversation would be like Christianity, our faith is a faith that is passed down from generation to generation, right? We have the scriptures, we take that faith, we pass it down from generation to generation, which means we don't, make it up. Right. It's passed down through generation to generation, family to family, which is a beautiful thing in the way that God's designed it. I think in the same way we look through technology, the way that we handle the power that we wield with these devices is, I think a lot of teenagers feel like they have to find their way through the navigation, sort of make up how to navigate through these huge developmental years without having anyone sort of pass down wisdom to them about how to handle the devices. Yeah. If people would hand you, other devices and things that are just that you're easily going to be sucked into and be addicted by. Of course, a lot of us would say, oh, no, that's dangerous. We need to help you with wisdom in that area. But I think a lot of students are trying to figure out how to navigate these treacherous like waters and circumstances on their own rather than having mentors, adults, parents, small group leaders, whatever it is, be able to speak into and pass down wisdom about how to handle it. It's hard because it is changing so rapidly. So in a lot of ways, I'm sort of a bridge between remembering the first few years of middle school and high school without it, but also remembering some of the later years with it. But even for some that are just a few years older than me, it's hard to remember just because the experience of those years was so much different than it is now. So this stuff's not going away. We obviously have to figure out how to handle it wisely, but it's a lot of power to have in the hand of an 11-year-old or a 13-year-old. And I think that in the same way that we pass down faith through generations, family to family, friend to friend, neighbor to neighbor, we have to learn good ways to teach habits, rhythms, discernment, so that teenagers don't feel like they have to make it up and fight against this huge current of culture to be able to handle these devices well. We need to come alongside them, not talk down to them because it's not their problem.
Right.
We don't talk down to young kids who haven't had faith passed down to them.
Yeah.
That's not that's not their fault, you know?
Sure.
We also need, in the same way, to pass down wisdom and discernment when it comes to screens. So,
yeah, and sometimes the parents, you know, I'm glad you said that. It's not their fault, because if we want to get real with this whole deal, kids aren't creating the apps that are sucking them into these screens. It's people your age, parents. They're software developers in their 30s and 40s that are creating this stuff, that are sucking them into it. And so, you know, it's, well, I don't know the phone. I'm not familiar with it. Like, there comes a point where you just have to get there. You have to study. You have to learn. You have to understand it, because you use the term treacherous waters. But the student doesn't look at it as a treacherous water. It's like they're in a boat, they're going down a river, and it's full of piranha. They have no idea. As long as they stay in the boat, they have no idea. The rest of us, a generation ahead, we're looking down like almost from above, right? And we can see them in the water. Or if you ever fly a helicopter over Topsail Island, you see all the sharks in there and everybody swimming. You know, it's like, oh, if you saw what I saw, right, you'd be out of that water, you know? And it's the same way with kids and teenagers and parents. There's so many ways, and we'll continue to talk about this stuff, but there is ways to protect your kids. There's other alternatives, and we have Haley is getting ready to be in middle school, so we decided to go with Gab Wireless. And so it's literally like the phone I used to have. It's modeled like a smartphone, but it doesn't have apps. It doesn't have the internet. It has a few apps, but it's like stopwatch and calculator, stuff like that. She can take pictures, but she can't send them. She can't receive pictures. She can make phone calls. She can send texts, and I have a control through my phone that I can see what's happening and see where she is. I mean, it's got a lot of really but the purpose of it for her, and while her other friends may have iPhones and all that kind of stuff, it's for me to help train her to be responsible with this device, but also to realize you need to put it away. Like, you don't, like, when you go out and play with your friends, don't bring your phone. Like, leave it on the counter. Hey, when you go to bed, phone goes to bed. And it goes to bed not in your room, it goes to bed here in a central place in the house where we can see it, right? And so it's just some of those habits and practices, which is a whole nother podcast in itself. But let's move into this. You recently just came off an amazing R Squad weekend. For those of you listening in, R Squad is our student ministry. And you guys had a camp weekend, one that was previously canceled because of weather. And it was like, okay, God, what are you going to do in this? And God showed up in an amazing way and an incredible way with through the delay. I knew it. I knew when we canceled that whenever we went from bad weather to fantastic weather. I mean, more kids showed up. So, you know, God was at work in all of those details. But you guys just came off of that, and just give us some highlights. Some of your, you know, hey, here's the top 2 or 3 things that we saw take place over this weekend.
Definitely. Yeah. So many things to celebrate. And of course, having to postpone, change a trip, just can so get in your head, you know, and like we were talking about, this weekend focused on truth and lies and the devil and all, like, pretty like deep theological things. And we've been joking about, you know, when you do a retreat weekend about how much the devil sucks, he's going to do everything he can to prove it to you. And he was certainly doing that, but we overcame. So,
because the theme of the weekend was
the truth about lies.
Truth about lies.
Yeah, and obviously we spoke about the devil, whose main strategy and attack is lies.
And your gear, your T-shirts and everything said what? It said the
devil's a liar. Yeah, so
which is pretty awesome.
We got a bunch of students.
We got 100 kids running around
at the
here
high school and at the skate barn and all these places wearing hats and shirts that say the devil's a liar, which is pretty cool. You got to be pretty bold to wear a shirt that says that. So. Anyways, a few things that as I reflect back on that were just so powerful, because this was our biggest trip. We took 125 people, which is amazing. Awesome. We had 8 students make a decision to follow Jesus for the first time, which is incredible. At the weekend, since then, we've actually had 2 students who were a part of the trip who have since come back after a few days of processing, who have had a conversation. One was with their mom and one was with a small group leader who prayed to receive Christ. So the total from that trip is 10 salvations, which is amazing.
So cool. That's worth some boogie music. There we go. Yeah. Okay. There we go. All right. Good.
Amazing. But as I think a little bit more on some of the just intangibles or what's kind of happening throughout the week that isn't necessarily such a clearly defined metric, what I think of is the way that our students are forming a spiritual community. What I mean by that is the way that they are breaking down barriers and walls so that they can unapologetically worship God.
Yeah.
The way that they're doing that just boldly, with confidence, with no care for who's around them, is just a beautiful thing to see. The way that our older students are leading the way and leading from the front for our younger students. The way that students were praying over each other, going out of their way to put an arm around someone, to pull them aside, to have a conversation, to mend a relationship. I mean, the fact that we could be moved to a place where high schoolers, with all the drama and junk and all the things in there, could set aside their differences, could apologize and ask for forgiveness, and then work towards reconciliation of relationship. I mean, we got a lot of adults that are still trying to figure that out. And so the fact that 15, 16-year-olds were willing to be humble to the point of restoring and mending relationships, owning their part in it, but also developing spiritual community in the sense of offering forgiveness and extending forgiveness and being willing to receive it as well. So that's a beautiful thing. And then this picture sort of this community, the way we support each other and care for each other. We did a talent show, which there's moments in youth ministry where you, up until the moment it happens, you're like, this might be a good idea. This might be a bad one, but we're about to find out. You know, it's either going to be a 10 or a 0. That's
at least 70% of youth ministry.
For sure. And I think that, I'm learning how to just take some more risks and just roll with it. And I was a little worried. I'm not going to lie, going into it. We had people signing up, for all different types of talents. And I'm looking at the sheet like, well, I don't really know if that's a talent, but, anyway. So
you got Sam, who just passes out. No.
Totally. So we had a lot of students sign up for it, and I'm like, okay, is this going to be awkward? Are people going to go up, do their talent, and then it's just like 125 blank stares and just like...
Sure. Nightmare scenario.
Yeah, okay, next up, our students were losing their minds over even the most bizarre and wacky, talents.
Yeah.
I mean, we had people coming up and just, I can touch my tongue to my nose.
Yeah, come on.
We had someone come up and sing Baby Shark. I mean, we had a crew come up and sing the Backstreet Boy. I mean, like, we had all these different things that were going on, and
I heard that.
Yeah,
that was the worst.
Yes. But crowd participation was an all-time high. Yeah,
it was
so
it was
the way that community was just supporting each other. Really just living in the moment, being present to it, being honoring and respectful. Those are all things that you yearn for in a youth ministry. They're hard to get. They're hard to grab a hold of and be a part of your culture. But the way our leaders have been and setting the tone, as well as just some of our other student leaders, just created this beautiful space where we could just let the guard down. We could have a lot of fun and just be goofy, not take ourselves too seriously. Yeah. And it was just this really cool moment of students going up and being vulnerable. I mean, to walk up on stage and sing in front of 125 people, a lot of people are like, no, thank you. You know?
Right.
To do it and, to not do it well, and then to have the community just be like, that was amazing. That was incredible. They're hooting and hollering. We're there to have a good time and to goof off, but it was just this beautiful picture sort of what a community of students that encourage each other can be like. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's pretty uncommon today, and so that was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I think, part of that risk, I don't think students put themselves out there anymore because they know there's somebody that's always recording them.
Yep.
And so when you removed all of those things, it's like, man, now they can come out of that shell that they create in culture, and it's like, I can actually be a 14-year-old kid for a minute.
Yeah.
Which is heartbreaking on one hand, but also really encouraging on the other. One of the things you guys did, I believe you called it the line. Was that it?
Yeah, the line session.
The line session. Talk to us about, because parents have probably heard some things from students like, hey, we did this thing, and they're probably trying to get a picture of what actually took place there. But you guys would look at this as one of the most spiritual impacting moments of your weekend. So talk us through what that looked like and what you saw as a result of it.
Well, this was just like the talent show in the sense of this is something we had never done before at any R Squad event or camp or anything. And so there's always that, how's this going to go? Are we going to explain this right? Are students going to respond? A lot of hey, we're going to see how it goes. We feel led to do this. So the line session happened Saturday afternoon. We had 2 regular sessions up to that point with some teaching about lies and truth and the war that we're in and following Jesus and how this is a fight. It's not just something we sit back and kind of react to life. Is like, no, we're called to fight this battle, to put on the armor of God, things of that nature. And so the line session came after a moment where we preached and spoke on the devil. He's the mastermind of evil in society. He has one strategy, which is to tell lies, which is to be a deceiver.
Yeah.
As I said, when he speaks his native tongue, the scripture says it's lies. And so he twists scripture, he tells lies, he deceives us. And a lot of times those lies appeal to desires that are within our own hearts, which is why they're so deadly and deceptive.
Yeah. What
we hadn't really discussed up to that point was the enemy works best and is most lethal in isolation.
Sure.
Right? The scripture says he prowls around looking for someone that he can devour. A lot of times when we watch Animal Planet or Planet Earth or whatever, it's the, which one gets got. It's the, the deer or the whatever who's
the one is away
separated from the pack. Right.
Yeah,
so there's safety in the pack. So the line session was a session where we put a line of duct tape through the floor. We moved all the chairs, and we created a space for two things to be accomplished. Number one, for students to know that they're not alone. And so we talked through some popular lies that students believe. So some of them were, if you believe the lie that you have to perform well and achieve to be loved by people or to be loved by God. That's a popular lie.
Yeah.
That society pushes onto us. Another one was...
so when you ask that, what happens?
Yeah, we would ask that. We would ask students in boldness to step to the line.
So you're on a microphone.
I am. I'm
right?
on a microphone.
And you're saying, hey, if you have believed this, what are they? They
this
step
line,
up. They just
step
they're on the edges of the room.
They can step to
they
the
walk
line.
to the middle.
Right.
Wow.
So we started with something simple like, hey, if you've told a lie this week, step to the line.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
125 people to the line. Yeah.
Well, the rest of you are liars too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You did now.
And so the second goal of it, the first one was we want to make sure you're not alone. So when you see someone else is working through, you told a lie this week too? Okay,
yeah.
It wasn't just me,
Sure.
There's some safety in that, and in a weird way, there's some encouragement in that. But the second purpose of it was to make sure that students have a moment of confession.
Yeah.
Because what the enemy wants to do is for you to continue to live in darkness, right? To continue to have sins in secret, to continue to not have the issues that need to be brought to your attention and you need to be made aware of, to continue to have those in darkness rather than brought into the light.
Wow.
Where Jesus and his truth can shine brightly on those. So it was, we want you to know you're not alone. And we want you to have a moment of confession of, this is me. This is something I've been dealing with. I need to be honest about that in front of my peers and in front of my leaders. And so as students would step to the line, I mean, we did our first one about, if you've believed the lie that you need to perform or achieve to be loved by people or God. And I mean, no joke, 90 students probably went and stepped on that line. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah,
right. And so then what would happen is I would take a moment of just speaking and kind of praying scripture and truth into the midst of that specific thing. Here's who God says you are, right? Here's what the enemy wants you to believe, but here's who God says you are.
Oh, wow.
Here's the way he feels about you. Here's the way he sees you. Here's how he's removed your sin. I mean, like, we're just working through scripture. We're speaking truth over them. And then we would invite students who maybe didn't connect necessarily or struggle with that specific thing to step to the line with them, to lay hands on them, and leaders and students are praying over groups of students that are working through that specific thing. So after that moment, we would then move back, and then we would work through another one. Hey, step to the line if you've been struggling or believing the lie that you can hide your secret sin because it doesn't hurt anyone,
Wow,
we have students come to the line. So we worked through about 5 or 6 big lies that and not just teenagers, but everyone believes.
Yeah.
It was the same thing. We would speak truth directly into that moment, in that situation. Leaders and people would come to the line to support them, to encourage them, to let them know they're not alone. And they would pray over them, and they would encourage them. And so powerful, powerful moment. We ended with 2 songs that our team came out and played, and we did a dismissal. So the whole thing was about 45 minutes, but we had students who just didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
I mean, the students that are hugging each other after that moment, the students that pulled a small group leader to the side to talk for a while. We had some leaders and students that just wanted to sit in a quiet room because it was obvious the Spirit of the Lord was in that space, and they just needed some rest and renewal that came from not having their phone, not having distractions, and just sitting in that moment and posture of worship. So it was incredibly powerful. It was silent in a room for probably 2.5 hours. And we had a lot of students hang out, talk with their small group leader, confess sin, ask for forgiveness. A lot of tears, but a lot of good tears and moments of confession, and students knowing they're not alone. So it was incredibly powerful. I know a lot of students just left with this weight lifted off of them. They felt free. They felt light. They felt that the confession, that the encouragement, that the truth was all kind of coming together and helping them be able to continue to avoid believing lies, which helps them avoid living those things out. So really powerful.
And I'm going to push on parents here for a minute. Like, when you look at your calendar and you debate, is it important for my teenager to go to this R Squad event? Like, that's why it should be priority.
Right.
If you're prioritizing your kid getting yelled at by some coach and parents arguing on the sidelines because little Bobby's not kicking the ball enough, and you think that's more important than students having a moment of confession of sin to God, confession with other people,
right,
working through what could potentially be debilitating adult issues if not settled and realized and brought to the truth and brought to the light. Yeah, you got to get to work.
Definitely.
In your priority structure.
Yeah. I mean, where else in society
doesn't take place anywhere else
do students, the teenagers come together even just to have a real conversation? I think a lot of our students were like, I have not had a real conversation in years. You know what I mean? Like, literally, I have not had a real conversation.
I've been isolated. If there was ever a time when they need their ones now, we have to retrain the next generation to have real conversations.
Yeah. It was powerful. So, powerful. Really something that is going to be a part of our squad events and weekend trips in the future. So it's great.
That's awesome. So you have this moment, and then you come back from camp, and it's when we were doing student ministry back in the day, it was like you brought them all back home, you gave them to mom and dad, and you just hoped your phone didn't get blown up because some kid did something dumb, right? And their mom's now mad, right? But you come back. We still have a little bit of that, right? You're like, okay, what are we gonna what did this kid do, that I don't even know about? I'm going to hear about a week later.
Totally.
But you did an amazing thing. You put together a guide for parents. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, your kid's back from camp, and here's pictures of the event, here, all these tools for them to go, okay, let me get just a glimpse of what took place here. Mm-hmm. But then you also provided them a conversation guide. Yeah. Because your kids are coming off this like really big, emotionally charged, but very spiritual weekend. Right. And dad's like, well, I paid the bills. So, like there was, I cleaned out the garage. Right. And your kids coming back in, they've allowed the Spirit to work in their life like they never have before. Mm-hmm. So now you're sitting at dinner together.
Yeah.
Johnny's he's all excited about what God's done, but the rest of the family hasn't been there with him, right? Yeah. So this guide that you gave them allows parents, one, to get an idea of, hey, here's what we talked through, and here's what we went through, and here's the scriptures we talked through, and but then also here's some conversations that you can have with your teenager.
Yeah.
So walk us through some of those questions and how you as a student director were envisioning these taking place in homes. And maybe we've got parents that are listening. Yeah, my kid on a trip, but I haven't taken advantage of this resource yet. Yeah. So walk us through how that works.
Yeah, definitely. So this weekend, The Truth About Lies, we spoke and taught on what Christians for hundreds of years have called the three enemies of the soul: the devil, the flesh, and the world. And these are all things that work together to sort of wreak havoc on society. And obviously you've got the devil, who's the mastermind, and he tells lies. And as we spoke about, those lies appeal to what Scripture calls our flesh, which is our sinful nature. That part of us that doesn't want to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. That part of us.
And there's an autopilot to that.
Wants to be our own God, for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that, again, is that unintentional formation that you live in. And then what happens when 8 billion people on planet Earth live according to their sin nature rather than to the way of the Holy Spirit? Well, that creates what Scripture calls the world, which, the big bad world, which is what it looks like when sin is normalized in society. We see that everywhere.
Right. Yeah.
So a lot of times we're good at calling out and complaining about the normalization of sin in society, but we're not backtracking far enough to go, oh, there's actually an active being, the devil, who we know the end of the story, he's ultimately defeated. But in the here and now, he is actually active in the world.
Sure.
Which is a crazy thing to think about. But, so that is the framework that we taught through. And that's just even a big thing to chew on for a little bit as a family and as parents.
You're spending a ton of time over the weekend. Ephesians 2,
Galatians
5.
Which, I mean, these passages are incredibly rich in theology that give
right.
you a framework of how that works, speaking about sin, about Jesus, about the devil, about the fruit of the Spirit, the sin nature, living according to the Spirit. It's good stuff. And so we provided some questions that would hopefully help families work through the framework that we taught and allow them to get a little bit to root issues.
Yeah.
And so really we had students confessing lies, but I think as families, we got some lies that we've been living, lies that we've been believing. And so we had a question here about what are some lies as a family that each person in your family has been believing about who God is, about who you are, and what the good life is. That's what the enemy wants to get in and do is challenge the authority of God, challenge the authority of his word. God's not really good, or here's who you are, get you into shame and guilt and regret. And then not just identify the lie, replace it with the truth.
Yeah.
That's what we were hoping to do at the line session. So parents, we got to be aware of the lies that students are believing, that we're believing. But if that doesn't get replaced with truth of who God is, well, there's more work to be done there.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second one I think is so powerful. We've talked a lot in this conversation about habits, routines, rhythms, a lot of which got completely thrown off 2 years ago around this time. And in some ways, we're still trying to rebuild those. We can so easily get into autopilot or acting out of the flesh, the sin nature. You're just, these habits serve me. These routines serve me. Cool, that's great. But to be able to sit down and go, hey, what are the routines and rhythms that our family has?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
What are the spiritual rhythms and routines? What are the sports rhythms and routines, the school rhythms and routines, the work rhythms and routines, family time rhythms and routines? Let's take an honest evaluation of those, and figure out how these are unintentionally or intentionally forming our families, because we are being formed into something, right? TikTok has a pretty clear idea of who it wants you to be,
right? Yeah,
and what it wants you to think. School has a pretty clear, all of these things are forming us. So this question, routines, rhythms, habits, allows us to analyze the ways in which we are intentionally or unintentionally being formed as a family, which I think is a pretty cool idea to think about. Yeah. Number 3 is, how does your family see sin normalized in society?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's all over the place. On Sunday morning at our squad weekend, we had students sharing about the way they see sin normalized in their school, the way they see sin normalized in their community, on the internet, in all these spaces where they live, work, and play. And then this follow-up, the thing about sin normalized in society is that what God calls evil is actually celebrated in our society. And the reverse, what God calls good, society is destroys, wants to tear apart, wants to get rid of. And so I think for a family to have a conversation about hey, what are you seeing in society that's becoming normal, but God has actually warned us against it, or he's commanded against it. Yeah. Pretty crazy. And then the final thing, we just attached, we had an attachment to the email, which was a card that we gave to guys and girls throughout our squad weekend, which was a time for them to spend by themselves, alone, in silence and solitude for just about 20 minutes. And this was before the line session. We gave them a card that helped them get thinking, what are some of the lies I've been believing over the past few years about who I am? So a couple we've got on the guys card is real men don't cry. Right.
Sure. Yeah.
A little bit of porn is harmless. My sin isn't really that bad. What others think I am matters more than who I really am, right? Just some questions about your identity and what you do and all of that. For some of the ladies, we had, beautiful girls are worth more. That's a lie. I am my own authority. If I just had friends, I wouldn't be so lonely. God is just like my father. I mean, we had some lies in there. They're big things. And maybe a student necessarily didn't connect with one of these, but it led to them figuring out what that deep insecurity or root kind of sin or lie or temptation from the enemy was. And I think that set the scene for the line session as students were able to reflect privately on those. So this is just a resource to get conversation going. The reality is that the enemy's tempting us every day with lies. He's throwing deception in our face, and he's very crafty. Yeah. He quotes scripture.
Sure.
In the Bible. He
knows it.
Right. And so if we're not staying on top of this and picking up the sword, the shield to fight, we're not drawing to attention and becoming aware of what some of these lies and temptations are based on who we are as people, man, we can be sitting ducks sometimes for the enemies and attacks, or for the arrows and the attacks of the enemy. And so as a family, of course, we've got to get together and have conversations, because parents, you're also under attack, right?
Yeah.
We've also got lies that we've believed or that you can believe. And a recurring theme kind of throughout the weekend was, if we believe lies, we end up living them. And that's how sin is normalized. So it's a guide. I hope it's helpful for a lot of you. And
even if they didn't go on the trip, earlier I was like talking about hey, if you're choosing soccer over this, you're a terrible parent. You're not a terrible parent. You made a bad decision.
Yeah.
Right. At the end of the day, though, if you can provide something like that for your child, even taking this and sitting down and going, okay, they didn't make it to the weekend, but let's just kind of talk about some of these ideas. Anybody can do this.
Totally.
Anybody listening can grab this and work through the worksheet, get it done.
20 minutes by yourself. Yeah. I mean,
your teenager needs this space.
Definitely.
So if they're not here to do that with you on a weekend, how can you as a parent create that for them outside of that space?
Definitely.
That's how you help your kids win.
Yep.
Through this kind of stuff.
Right. That's it.
Yeah. That's good, man. Matt, look, I'm just so thankful for your leadership, what you're doing. And I think God's got huge things in store for Renovation Church, our teenagers in this area, what's going to take place there. So as we wrap up, Jordan, you're always reading and thinking through stuff. Yeah. What are some, resource recommendations that you would have for parents out there right now?
Yeah, I've got a few, always trying to find the next thing. If you're a reader, one book that I'm working through right now, especially in preparation of having a child in the home, which we're super excited about. The book is called Habits of the Household. It's by a guy named Justin Earley. I read one of his books a while back called The Common Rule, but Habits of the Household is just that. It's 8 habits that deal with things you're already doing. Eating meals.
Right.
Going to work. In the car, right? These different things that we're all doing at all times, and how we can make those intentional rather than unintentional formation opportunities. It's fantastic. I'm probably going to read it like 5 times in the next few months. The Bible Project app, incredible.
Yeah,
fairly new. But it's got so much in there of podcasts that go along with things. The way they've even just organized, I think they call it movements or something, but the way they're pulling different stories and sections of Scripture together with some teaching and coaching, I think is brilliant. And then something, if you're interested more in a little bit of the research side of what's going on in the broader scale of youth culture right now, even some early research coming out about impacts of COVID in the past 2 years that have been on the minds and hearts of students. Global youth culture is an incredible resource and site. So I believe it's just globalyouthculture.net. They've got a list of reports and research that you can go in there and look at. It's incredibly easy to follow along with, but they've got just amazing stuff on Gen Z reports, research, specific questions that different students are struggling with when it comes to faith and identity and all these things, and what students are saying and what they're responding to. And as I said, also some early data on some of the impacts of COVID and the way that that's affected, the minds, hearts, and lives of students. So that's global youth culture.
Yeah, and if you're a parent listening, you've got Gen Zs, but man, you got Gen Alpha. I remember when we launched Renovation Church, I read a book and it was talking about Gen Z, and the first page of the book said, all the focus and energy you're putting on the millennials, throw that out. It's time to get started. Yeah. Gen Z is up, right? And now we're going to have to manage both. We've got very real Gen Z things to talk about, but Alpha being right behind them. Growing up in a fully and completely, totally digital world. There's some major firsts there. So continue to learn, continue to read, continue to study, continue to pray.
That's it.
And great things. Jordan, man, thanks so much for taking some time to be with us here on the podcast. We'll have some notes down here for you to get a hold of that, as well as some of these worksheets we've been talking about and all the great stuff. If you're listening and you're in the area, you got a teenager that's not in our squad,
that's right.
Get them there.
That's it.
All right, Jordan, thanks so much for being here, buddy. Appreciate you, man.